Welcome to the Gruber Morning Show. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner, and I want to also introduce you to Marcus Barron, who's joining us today. Marcus is the builder of one of the most popular videos that we've had for quite a while. If Jesse wanted to throw that up on the screen. And it is about a tiny home. And this video has gotten so much interest.
It has. This is me talking about a collision damaged Model S, and I'm basically saying, what can you do with something like this when it's beyond repair? We use them for parts.
Right.
But Marcus ended up innovating and creating something that most people hadn't thought about with this type of a chassis, with this type of a destroyed vehicle.
What? Tell us the story, Marcus. I'm so interested to hear what made you think of the idea of a tiny home in the first place on Model S.
Absolutely, Mark. Well, it's a bit of a long story. My brother and I grew up this way. Our parents had a little Airstream initially in our early days. Then we moved from Santa Fe, New Mexico up to Colorado in a little truck bed camper.
Mm-hmm.
And gosh, that was one of the coldest winters I can recall. Barely any insulation in this little camper. My mom and brother slept in the portion up above the driver passenger. My dad below in the back where the little dinette would fold down. And then I had this little fold out cupboard almost up above that I would crawl into. And so some of my fondest memories growing up this way in these tiny little spaces. And that progressed when I went off to college. I studied architecture at Syracuse.
Mm-hmm.
And to get from Santa Fe, New Mexico to Syracuse, New York, with my architecture models and my tools every year, I decided to purchase an ambulance, a diesel ambulance.
Oh, really?
Hey, Marcus.
See, this is all new. I didn't know about this. This is fascinating, Marcus.
Can you just stay right up on the mic for me?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Jesse. And this ambulance, it had a high top roof, so it was perfect. In the back, you could stand up. And I converted the engine, it was a diesel engine, to run on waste vegetable oil.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
And to do that, essentially, we installed a series of tanks in the back and coiled copper within these tanks. Took the hot lead coming off of the coolant, the radiator, piped that through the coiled copper, and heated up the vegetable oil.
Mm-hmm.
We also filtered the vegetable oil, so no salt and pepper. We brought it down to like a 2-micron filtration. And at that point, once it's clean and hot, it runs at the same viscosity as diesel. So the engine can't tell the difference. It's happy.
And
That's incredible.
And so what we'd do is my brother studied structural engineering at Lehigh University.
Okay.
Civil engineering. And so I would drive from Syracuse, pick him up in Lehigh, and then we'd begin the long journey back to Santa Fe. And we'd stop at restaurants along the way and usually stop in for a meal initially.
Mm-hmm.
And when we're done eating, we'd ask, could we have some of your waste fryer oil?
Right.
Usually they'd chuckle and
Yeah.
say, go for it, absolutely. And they couldn't believe it when we'd pump this oil out, and sure enough, the car runs on it. You can smell, of course, what they've been cooking.
So the thing that fascinates, I think, me and potentially the audience, your connection to Tesla actually started before you even got into the repair of the vehicles or into this project. Tell us about the connection early on in your career.
Yeah, it goes back to, what was that, 10th grade biology course, Diane Catron, AP Bio. She put on I think it was an early video of the Tesla Roadster, way back when. This was 2008-ish.
Mm-hmm.
And from that moment, it clicked for me. That's the future.
Mm-hmm.
And so actually, we had built the model that you see in this video, the wooden portion of it we had constructed. And then we found a wrecked Tesla Model S that had fallen off of a transit truck. And that's exactly what we were looking for. We had planned to chop the whole body off anyhow. And so we got it at a good discounted price.
And this was a car that I'm assuming they would not have been able to put back on the road. This would have
Yes.
been deemed a parts car at
Yeah.
auction. Okay.
Fortunately, it didn't receive a salvage title, but it would have. I mean, it was the whole top was smashed in. We just intercepted it before the salvage title, I suppose. So we haven't had any issues with being disconnected from Tesla's supercharging network that we're aware of yet. And what we did is we hacked the whole top of that body off and put our wooden model onto it. It fit perfectly. We had one issue. We had to narrow the entire wooden model about 2.5, 3 inches. So we took it off, chopped it down, put it back together. And there came a point where investors kept asking and curious people who we'd show, friends, family, what's your relationship with Tesla? How are you going to scale this? We thought, well, we don't know yet. They don't know about this. This is just a dream, a vision of ours. So this was kind of middle of COVID days. Me and my brother in Santa Fe, we'd gotten to a point with the vehicle. We thought maybe it's a good time to try and present this to Tesla, see what they would think. And it took a journey up north to Boulder, Colorado. And actually, there's a little bit more backstory to this that I've forgotten. Maybe we'll get into that later. But in Boulder, I was hoping to kind of stumble across Kimball, see if I might be able to show him some images of what we've built so far. And right in the middle of COVID, the restaurant was really, really struggling up there in Boulder. His first restaurant, The Kitchen.
Now we're talking about Kimball Musk, folks. This is Elon's brother.
Elon's brother, yes. And turned out, so I went in for a meal, had this delicious meal, and I hear the manager describing to the table next to me how difficult it was in that time for them to keep staff, to keep providing, keep cooking this food for their customers. And I figured, you know what? Maybe I can be helpful in this moment. It seems like they could really use some help. And I offered to roll up my sleeves and got to work peeling potatoes, washing dishes, being helpful in any way I possibly could. And I fell in love with cooking in the process. And it ended up being an incredibly beneficial experience because the heart of our vehicle is the kitchen. And to see an industrial kitchen, the way those facilities operate, the team, the equipment, was profound. And I wanted to take that learning and integrate that into our kitchen design. And so my time there up in Boulder, I ended up cooking for Kimball multiple times a week. He'd bring his family through, investors. I helped him to sell off his next door franchise, which was kind of a scaled down version of the kitchen, which was really struggling at the time. He ended up selling that off and putting all of his focus into the original kitchen. He just opened a new restaurant in Austin. So we've got one now in the original in Boulder, one in Denver, one in Chicago, and one in Austin. And but my whole time there, I was focused on my work in the kitchen, and I wanted to have the vehicle be drivable before presenting it to them. And I met Elon for Kimball's 50th birthday. He flew in. We spent a whole week preparing that meal, and then 4 hours cooking the day of, Friday night. And at the end of the meal, Elon and Kimball came back to the kitchen, and most of the staff had left. But fortunately, I was still there and, greeted Kimball and his big brother.
Right.
Shorter brother, but big brother right next to him. Elon, thank you for joining us this evening. And I wanted so badly in that moment to show them some renderings, some images.
Right.
But I refrained out of respect for a very special moment they were having, Kimball's 50th.
Sure.
Wanted them to have their family time. And I didn't want to present it until it was drivable.
Mhm.
So that then brought me to Gruber
Okay.
to get this thing driving.
hmm And by the way, Marcus works at Gruber Motor Company. He's one of our technicians. He ended up processing a bunch of Tesla Roadsters and learned a lot about the Roadsters and is currently working on all of the EVs that we have at Gruber Motor Company. And if for some reason Elon is watching, we have a very motivated designer here that would love to show you this tiny home as a potential for developing a product like this. I mean, Tesla will eventually be moving into many different types of vehicles, and why not recreational vehicles?
Oh, yeah.
So, at this point, you started to work with us, and you started to or continue to work on your project, and it's actually driving and running now.
Yeah. We had a huge breakthrough a few months ago. Your son Peter stopped by and gave us a bit of a tutorial on a Model S we were having issues with in the shop. And we got deep into the high voltage interlock circuitry,
Okay.
which is critical to all electric vehicles at this point, to keep them safe. If there's any issue with the HVIL, the car will not drive. The high voltage system is shut down, disengaged to prevent electrocution. So it got me thinking in that moment, that tutorial with Peter, could there be some issue with our HVIL in the prototype? And sure enough, my brother came out. We went through every single wire through the high voltage junction box, the DC to DC converter, checked all the fuses. They were all good. And then we noticed a high voltage orange cable going into the heating element, which is part of the whole HVAC unit. And we plugged that in, nothing happened. Then we plugged in a smaller cable, another harness that controls that component. And boom, we were
fired up.
able to drive.
That'd be great.
I can only imagine that you have a vehicle, the top is crushed, you're cutting off everything, and somehow you have to preserve all of the integrity of the wiring harnesses. That is a gargantuan task.
Yeah.
But it looks like you pulled it off, and we've been taking this thing up and down the road, and it freaks people out.
Have you tried to take it to a supercharger yet?
Not yet. Now, we did have a Tesla technician stop by years ago when we were in Santa Fe before going up to Boulder. We called them in to see if they might be able to help us, a mobile technician. He showed up with his van, and he looks into the garage door, and he asks, where's the car? And says, it's in the garage, in the shop. He goes, is it behind the wooden... And he kind of stops and realizes, sees the whole base of it. Nope, that's it. And we knew in that moment, either he's going to say, I can't do anything. You've voided every single warranty we have on this vehicle.
Right.
Or maybe he'd lend us a hand.
One of our viewers, by the way, and this is one of our most recent, most popular videos, by the way, up to just, I think, under 300 comments on the video, 103,000 views so far, and still going strong. But one of the comments was, you should take this to a Tesla service center.
Yeah.
And see how they respond.
And that was the reaction we got.
We have a couple of comments here. Let's get through those, and then we can continue with this fascinating story about this tiny home. Sammy Kamal from YouTube joined us. He's a Lucid fan. Hello, Lucid family. He was able to pick up 559 shares of Lucid this Tuesday morning. He says, I'm at 50,000, adding on, holding strong. Goonies never say die. Of course, we're all watching Lucid to see how they're going to migrate from this $2 level into something more, interesting.
Yes. And then on Facebook, Amir Hossein Najai says, hi there. I just want to know more about Tesla fast chargers.
Fast chargers. We actually, part of the segment here, if we can get to it today, is some improvements that Tesla is making. Despite having fired most of their supercharger team, it looks like they're still evolving and developing the product. So, Marcus, we're talking about the tiny home that you developed. Again, we did not anticipate the reaction to this video. There's an intense amount of interest about this vehicle. And tell us about some of the challenges removing the body, the steel, in other words, from this vehicle.
Yeah. So what we had to do, we took a Sawzall with a metal blade, a bunch of grinders and wheels, and went at the A, B, and C pillars that are part of the S, chopped those off. The whole roof structure kind of came off as one piece. The dismantling of the vehicle, that portion of the process went fairly quick. That was just a few days. Had the whole body off. And then the rebuild portion, that's what's taken time.
The structural integrity of the vehicle. Do you have any ideas yet about potential changes to the suspension, for example, considering the additional weight and the surface area?
Yeah. So in the back of the vehicle, what we don't have currently in the current prototype, the wooden version, is so essentially you've got your A post, B post, those go around the passenger, driver, where you sit. Then you've got the entry door itself, and then we've got a C post, and then behind a D post. So where that D post is, there's a threshold between the living space and the bathroom. And that portion there will be a steel tubular structure with diagonal bracing going down to the struts. And then additionally, where Mike suggested we add air suspension, at least to the rear, to be able to account for the weight increase. Ideally, we'd like a platform that has more ground clearance, larger tires that you can really take anywhere on Earth. This form that we've built is kind of ideal for urban settings where you've got smooth roads and not a lot of obstacles to navigate through. But future versions, we'd like to make this a vehicle that you can take anywhere on Earth and not have any worries of limitations.
One of the things I think that also fascinates the people that have been watching the video is scaling.
Yeah.
How do you go from prototype to actual production? A number of people were interested. I'm ready to buy one. How do I do that, basically?
Yeah.
So any thoughts or ideas about how to scale this?
Right. So ideally, we'd like to work out a relationship with Tesla such that we could purchase parts, components from them directly, and then do our own assembly, something of that nature. Of course, we've planned for alternate routes if that one doesn't work. When we started this concept, the Tesla Model S was all that existed. The Roadster, of course, but we weren't going to build one on a Roadster. And so something that we've been doing a lot of thinking about lately is when the Ford F-150 Lightning debuted. That is a body on frame, contrasted to the Model S, the X, and now the Cybertruck, the first truck that's a unibody, which makes it much more challenging to add a different body, mount a different body to. The F-150 Lightning, 8 bolts on each side of the frame rails, and the entire bed and cab lift off. Then we just have to dismount the dash assembly, reintegrate that, but we'd have an entire platform to build on top of. And then, of course, there's also the option to do it all from scratch. Much more time and cost intensive. But I do have thoughts of what is that next evolution, the next version of electric powertrains. So we've got some thoughts on that too.
You know, my thinking is Rivian might also be a candidate, but the difficulty I think that these kinds of companies have currently is they're in cash burn mode.
Yeah.
And for them to, develop new products and create even more investment is probably not in their future, at least short term. So, finding a platform that would accommodate this is probably the best idea so far. There was also some discussion that we had earlier. Maybe you can unpack this for us, Mark. crash testing. How do you crash test something
Yeah,
like
how do you
this?
crash test an RV? You know, what now is this going to be a Class A or a Class B RV?
This is technically a Class B. It's actually even a little shorter than what a Class B would be classified as. As far as I'm aware, RVs don't really require crash testing, at least to the extent that traditional SUVs, cars, sedans do. It's something that we'd like to do anyhow proactively,
Sure.
regardless of the requirements, just to ensure our customers' safety. When they get in an accident, we want to minimize harm to our customers.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
What other kinds of safety features do you think you're going to need to integrate into this as you get moving from early prototype to a later prototype?
Yeah. Well, if you look at something like the VW Westfalia, which is a really good precedent case study, the original camper vans, they produced a lot of those vehicles back in the day. And one of the biggest issues you had with those was the same configuration we have, having the driver and passenger so close to the front of the vehicle. So what happens when you get into a front impact and you're right there? We have a solution in theory that we think will solve that issue.
Okay.
It's kind of our secret sauce, so I don't want to reveal too much about that. But we have thought about that extensively. And I believe we have a very good solution.
Oh, good. Okay.
Okay. Well, do we think that Elon is going to be interested in this vehicle because he's a proponent of tiny homes? After he sold all his Bel Air mansions years ago, he's been reportedly living in something much smaller.
A little boxable house he has in Boca Chica at the Starship
Exactly.
base.
Yeah.
What about the if you remember at the cyber taxi reveal, they revealed not only a cyber taxi but more of a cyber personnel carrier.
Right.
Are there some similarities? You know, a big boxy vehicle on a potentially a larger frame, it could hold up to 20 people. Well, how would a frame like that work with a tiny home like yours?
Potentially. We just don't know at this point if that vehicle will also be a unibody. It seems to be the route Tesla is taking to maximize efficiency.
Okay.
But also that the kind of Art Deco style, I love it. It's its own unique creation. It's not quite in line with our design aesthetic. Also, it's a little big. I suppose we can do another larger version on that. That would be wonderful as well.
Sure. That's you know, I had to wonder if something like that would fit. And now, what as you look at developing this as you're going into next prototypes, are you going to be what kind of materials beyond wood are you looking at potentially using as your next generation?
So right now we've done the wooden version out of Baltic birch. It's very easy to mill. It's durable. It's beautiful. Multi-ply, so we can cut into it. We can bend it. It's been a wonderful material to work with for prototyping. The production version we want to do out of a mix of steel and aluminum.
Okay.
Steel for the A, B, and C posts, essentially the roll cage, and then clad with aluminum. With insulation, of course, inside. The current prototype, we've got a 4-inch wall cavity that can accommodate insulation. So we're looking at a mycelium-based insulation. So essentially you take a mold, you put a bunch of sawdust into it, and then you introduce a fungal body that grows and consumes all the sawdust. And what you're left with, its dead body in the end, is this insulative material.
Really?
That is very similar to a foam, but it doesn't off gas, and you don't have the toxicity in moments of flammability, and it's fairly inert. So very stable with moisture conditions if there's any moisture between the wall cavity. The other big thing will be gasketing, getting all of our gaskets detailed properly so we don't have leaks.
Oh,
Fascinating.
sure.
So this has an R factor. This
Yes.
organic, initially
absolutely.
organic
Right.
product.
I think it's roughly like an R10 per inch, something like that.
Not bad. Per
Wow.
inch. Wow.
Yeah.
That's fairly high R.
We'll see. We haven't put it to the test yet, but this is the specs from some of these groups.
Kind of reminds me of my first home, which had brake lights. The trailer out in Bristol, New York.
Yeah.
Yes.
we had there was aluminum skirting on the outside of the trailer, and mind you, this is New York, so
Oh,
it's
yes.
very cold, a lot of wind, a lot of snow drifts, and in the hallway at night, sometimes as you went to the bathroom, you would walk in a bit of snow barefoot, and the reason being is you had this aluminum fascia on the outside, kind of like corrugated.
Mm.
Then you had 1-inch thick insulation without paper on it. And then you had 1/4-inch paneling on the inside of the trailer.
Oy.
That was it. So what would often happen is the wind, because of the intense, which was picking up snow, would blow snow inside the trailer.
Oh,
So it sounds like you're going to have a much better R factor and a much better process for
Yeah.
this tiny home.
yeah.
Well, for those of you interested in seeing the rest of the story on this tiny home, I've got up on my screen here our YouTube channel, and I can show you down on the bottom. It's this video right here. And if you want the rest of the story, when we actually took it for a test drive with audio this time, all we were able to show was video, feel free to go to our channel, which, by the way, folks, if you look up here, we are at 1 million plus subscribers already. And
Yes.
where Marcus works at Gruber Motor Company, we actually got our gold plaque the other day, and which is something that you get from YouTube once you reach the 1 million threshold. So it looks like we've got a comment here. YouTube Spoonie412 says, will the tiny house include a Tesla phone? And will it be Starlink capable? T-Mobile claims Starlink and Tesla phones don't exist.
Yeah. Yeah, that is something we've wanted to integrate since we heard about Starlink way back when. Absolutely.
Yeah, we've got another one here.
And then Amir Hossein Najee, again on LinkedIn this time, he says, what would be your advice for a power electronics and electrical machine master student who wants to dive deep into EVs and become an expert in that?
Well, my advice would be to land a job with one of these emerging EV manufacturers. And believe me, they are desperately looking for talent like you're describing. So it won't be a hard process to find a job. Of course, you have to send out some resumes, go through some interview processes, but there's a serious shortage of people that understand this type of newer technology. And yeah, that would be my suggestion. It depends on where you live, of course, whether they have a plant and you may have to move somewhere in the country. But Lucid, Aptera, Rivian, Tesla, of course, Nikola, any of those companies that are emerging EV manufacturers.
You can also do something similar to what Marcus just did, and just you've picked up a project and you've learned a lot as
Yeah.
you've gone through this, because it sounds like your background is in architecture, not in
Right.
doing the mechanic work or high voltage.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like EV Smoke ATX from Instagram points out, Austin, Texas is always showing EV love. That's true. I can only imagine how many people, work in those plants and the kind of recruitment that takes place on a daily basis there.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, Marcus, thank you so much for joining us today.
Mark.
This has been a fun podcast this time.
Thank you. Pete, thank you.
And we will continue to promote additional videos on this progress or on the progress of this vehicle. So stay tuned to our YouTube channel. One of them is actually a time-lapse photography video of the removal of the chassis on this Tesla Model S. And then as you guys were starting to put stuff on it.
Yeah.
Fascinating video.
Early days.
Oh, that would be fascinating.
Yeah, we'll be posting that soon too. We've got a few news items to get through here. The Tesla supercharger network apparently is getting some improvement. And for all EVs, they are detailing now the improvements, which are making stall availability more accurate than ever, increasing the number of long supercharging cables. A lot of other non-Tesla vehicles were having a difficult time connecting to the charger, needing to back in and sometimes even take two spots because the cables on the superchargers were just too short for that particular other brand. So they're looking at extending that and also modifying the supercharger layout so that they don't need to block stalls because they have a different type of vehicle orientation. And the final thing is they're encouraging manufacturers to follow suit with the charge port locations. It makes a huge difference too. You know, the NAC system is usually in the driver's rear quarter panel. And if we can get the other EV manufacturers to follow suit, it's going to make the universal charging options a lot more capable. Instagram, I am Kula J says, hi there, gentlemen. Love the electric bus. Well, there's another name for it. We were calling it tiny home. We were calling it recreational vehicle. Could be a bus, right?
Could be.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can't wait until it's complete. All right. We have a news item here that Tesla continues to decrease the amount of water that is required to build their vehicles. And the industry average currently is 3.37 cubic meters of water. And Tesla in 2018 was 3.27. Currently, Tesla is at 2.48.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that will make the Germans happy because they're very concerned about the Grünheide factory outside of Berlin and water usage and demand on water in that area.
And for here in the U.S., a cubic meter of water is about 265 gallons.
Oh, okay.
So what that means is your industry average at 3 1/3 cubic meters ends up being somewhere around 600 gallons of water or so. And Tesla coming down to 2.5 cubic meters, that's pretty good, pretty significant.
Mm-hmm. One final thing I wanted to close with was Tesla's trajectory or journey, because their success, according to this article, really goes beyond making electric cars. They redefined the entire industry by challenging all the norms. And here's some key lessons from Tesla's rise to the top. One is innovation. Well, they say innovation is at the heart of Tesla's success. They didn't just build electric cars. They reimagined what cars could be. For example, they give over-the-air software updates, keep improving cars even after they've been sold.
Yeah.
And recalls. Do you remember how expensive those used to be? All the owners had to drive their cars to a dealership and then deal with, what do I drive while it's at the dealership?
Well, and there was such a political thing between the cars and the Highway Safety Transportation Board. Because the car dealers would push back, the auto manufacturers would push back and say, it's a minor thing. People can live with it. It's not dangerous.
Yeah.
And so don't make it a recall. And now it's not as much of an issue.
Yeah, and the majority of recalls now are strictly over-the-air updates while you're home asleep and you let your car receive the update.
Mm-hmm.
That was a groundbreaking discovery for the automotive industry. 2, plan to grow. Tesla's growth strategy has been meticulous and forward-thinking, they say. They started with high-end models to fund the development of more affordable options. They then invested heavily in infrastructure, like the gigafactories and the supercharger network. And we were all wondering, how are they going to be able to sustain this, suspecting that the supercharger network can be monetized? And it is now.
Yeah.
Not only for the Tesla customers, but for all of the other vehicles. And then, of course, getting the NAC standard accepted universally as the standard made a huge difference as well. But it was Tesla's initial, focus on building this kind of infrastructure, and it allowed them then to scale effectively and dominate the electric vehicle market. And then the final thing they list here is building loyalty. The owners often became brand advocates. And remember, Elon had very specific ideas about how to sell his electric cars. He wasn't going to push them through car dealers, recognizing that the people there were commission-driven salespeople, and they didn't know much about electric cars, and they were going to stay with what they felt comfortable with. he knew he wasn't going to get the equal time. They were going to push people into ICE vehicles. In fact, Aaron, what were you telling me the other day when you were trying to buy an Ford F-150 Lightning? What did that dealership sales rep tell you?
Oh, he was just basically saying I didn't want one. He was trying to make up my mind for me. It's like, why would you want to do that? So no, they just weren't interested in showing me anything, and then they're trying to tell me that, yeah, we'll have to order it for you. We'll have to wait. You know, I'm like, okay, I'll order one. Well, how much does that cost? Well, do you really want to wait that long? We have something here for you. And it was just a runaround. It was annoying.
He was talking you out of it. What did he try to push you into again?
He tried to push me into a Raptor, an F-150 Raptor, which I'm sure they would love for me to spend 90 grand on a truck. You know, and then a couple diesels, which I'm a diesel guy, so I ended up going, diesel again,
Right.
but I mean, I couldn't even test drive a Lightning. I mean, it was just ridiculous. The other one was the Power Boost, which I was a little interested in that, but yeah, it was just ridiculous.
So staying with Tesla's innovation and that they built brand loyalty, these customers that were now able to buy direct, and remember, we live in the information age. The distance between producer and potential customer has shrunk exponentially. It used to be the old traditional models. Manufacturer didn't have sales staff. They worked through manufacturers' reps. The reps set up limited distribution, and you had all of this profit taking in between. Very little control for the manufacturers. So what Tesla did was they went direct to the end user, and the states fought them. NADA, the National Association of Dealers, right? Auto dealers. There's strong legislation on the books, and they prevailed for a long time. And Tesla had a uphill battle trying to get the various states. Some of the stores, they opened Tesla display stores. They couldn't talk about price. They couldn't sell anything there. All they could do was educate. So things have changed. But anyway, they this loyal fan base then talked about their positive experiences. And they did that through a variety of sources, not just their friends, but through social media. And Elon, this is also somewhat unprecedented, interacted directly with customers through social media. You find that now even some of the presidents are doing it,
Yes.
getting on social media. That was unheard of, 10, 20, 30 years ago. Of course, that was before the age of the internet even, right? So, but it was a clear game changer, and this type of satisfaction then fostered a strong and loyal following. So the suggestion in this article is if you want to grow your business and drive success and stand out, follow some of these principles. Well, thank you for joining us as always. We'll be back next week for another edition of the EV podcast. In 20 minutes or so, we're going to have our Tesla Roadster podcast at 11 a.m. Mountain Standard Time. So if you're interested in Roadsters, feel free to join us for that. I'm Pete Gruber.
I'm Mark Schaffner. We're here with Marcus Barron. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you.